What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Quarters Podcast. I'm here with my co-hosts, Randy Hall and Christian Williams, and we're diving into Dane Brugler's top 50 from The Athletic, talking about a kind of the stock up, stock down, some surprises. Hey, who are we seeing that not in there? We're going to talk about Christian's Drew Aller. Like, what the hell is going on? Why is he not in his top 50? Or he's barely in there. He's hanging on. We're going to be talking about that as we get into this episode. All right, let's get into the top 12 here. And again, this is from Dane Brugler's Athletic. He does amazing work out there. So we're just going to kind of be breaking it down. We're not critiquing it all because he's much smarter than we are. Just kind of going over some things that we see, some differences there. Here is his top 12, and then we'll kind of dive into it. Travis Hunter is his number one player on his big board, cornerback / wide receiver out of Colorado. Will Johnson, cornerback out of Michigan, is number 2. Abdul Carter, number 3, edge out of Penn State. Malachi Starks is a safety out of Georgia. Terrell McMillan, wide receiver out of Arizona. Ashton Jeanty at running back out of Boise State. Jalen Walker and Micah Williams, 2 edges from Georgia at 7 and 8. Mason Graham at defensive tackle at Michigan at 9. Luther Burden at 10, wide receiver out of Missouri. Will Campbell, offensive tackle at LSU. And then James Pierce, edge out of Tennessee. When you're looking at this, you know, the biggest riser of this group is Jalen Walker. He went up 33 spots there. What is your takeaway there? Right, let's just start off the top. Christian, what are you thinking of that going up that high? Does he deserve to go up to that top 10 mark?
So I get it. When I watch Jalen Walker play, I think you see some of the similar things that you see from Abdul Carter in that, like, he's an insane athlete. But I think where I get a little hesitant on Jalen Walker is some of the size issues appear on film. And so I think there's a real world in which long NFL tackles shut him down and make him not irrelevant, but definitely not worthy of a top 10 selection. So, but I do understand, like, there aren't that many players with this level of athleticism that you're going to find in this draft specifically. So I understand the big jump, and he's been phenomenal this year. He does have him graded as linebacker. I put edge on the graphic. He's played both. I think he's a better edge, so that's where I've had him graded. I think he's a fine linebacker, but you're not taking a linebacker in the top 10. So I'm a little iffy on that one.
Yeah. Well, they would say the same thing about a running back in the top 10, and
that's fair.
Ashton Jeanty sitting right there for a reason. I do agree. I think it's just stellar play so far has just propelled him up. I think he's made a lot of plays in the big moments. Same with Micah Williams, his teammate here. And yeah, the grading of specifically linebacker was a little jarring to me because I know it's probably close to 60-40 on the snaps, but I still think he's a little bit more of an edge. It's kind of the same thing as pretty much every edge on this list, where they're kind of going in situationally as edge and very situationally as linebacker. So I do think he deserves a huge rise up the board, but I think I'd still have, some of the blue chips like Mason Graham above him.
Yeah, and I think 2 things that kind of stood out to me about his first top 12. One thing that we've been talking about, and I think that we've been kind of mentioning how this tackle class is not as good as it has been in previous years. And for him not to have any tackle, especially with the premium the position is in his top 10, I think that's worth noting. Like, I think that's something that we've talked about is, like, if there is no one of that blue chip guy, Campbell's in there still. He also went down a little bit, one spot based on his first initial kind of big board. I think that's something to know. And then James Pierce hanging around in the top 12 surprised me. He went down 7 spots, but Pierce hasn't had that great of a year. I mean, we've mentioned him a few times, 6 sacks. His PFF grade, when you're looking at it, 84.4 has been fine, but his tackling grade has gone down. His pass rushing grade has been okay, 83.4. But in the big games, Georgia kind of no-showed. Alabama was his best game. But, I mean, I've mentioned it. I kind of went at it with a Tennessee fan on social media. I know you're surprised by that. But I was, because of something, I forget what we were talking about. And I said, maybe he comes back. Like, is there a possibility James Pierce comes back to school, Randy?
That'd be so tough simply because I think he's still being told he's a first round prospect.
Okay.
And that's obviously it's a drop from preseason where he dropped 7 spots from an August big board because in August we were talking about him as the first overall pick in some circles, at least. Maybe not us, but I do think he deserved to drop down. I still think he is one of the better edge rushers in this class. I do think he could easily do with some refinement with another year with this defensive coordinator who is clearly transcending this defense. But, I mean, if he's still being told by people like Dane Brugler and everyone else that he's a top 20 player in this class where there's not that many blue chip and we're only going to have like 15 first-round grades, if that, I think he'd be a little bit malpractice in your own career to come back.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm not gonna tell that Tennessee guy he was right, but I will say, like in the article for the Athletic, they did say that like there are concerns about like just some of the ball scheme. They talked about maybe it is possibly just like that defensive scheme not really highlighting him, and he did put in there that that he's getting comparison from scouts from Will McDonald IV. Obviously, with the Jets, he has 8 sacks this year. I thought that was interesting.
Developmental wise, you're right. It's just the reality of the draft is what I was going with there.
Yeah. I also think Will McDonald had a bigger bag, like a bigger toolbox when he came out than what Pierce currently has. Now, I mean, Pierce is a younger player than what Will McDonald was as well. Like McDonald, I think, was at the Senior Bowl, right? Like he was a senior. He had played 4 years. So maybe that's incentive to go back and refine your skills. But I think you're right, Randy, that NFL teams are probably still looking at him and saying, we can get more out of him. So he'll probably declare.
All right. So Christian, any big surprise, any takeaways from this first 12 that you're seeing here? I know you did a top 50 board, like anything drastically different from what you did compared to what he has?
I mean, the one that stands out to me is him still having Luther Burden this high. I talked about it on that big board that I dropped, but like Burden's kind of scaring me a little bit. Just some of the stuff that we've seen this year, the lack of concentration with, the drops haven't been plentiful, but there have been a lot of balls that he could catch that he doesn't. The usage is back to like the weird stuff where he's not really running a ton of routes downfield like he did last year. So I guess like I still see the upside. We compared him to Jamar Chase in our Devy guide. Like I think there's still that level of upside, but I just don't think he's really capitalized on that upside and that potential just yet. And to me, that's worthy of moving down a little bit in this class where I think, we're going to get to some wide receivers that he does like here in a little bit, but I just don't see that big of a gap between Burden and wide receiver 3, which is down at like towards the back of the first round here.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I think that says more about he thinks there's like 9 top prospects because he's in a tier here with Will Campbell and James Pierce. And, I guess the next couple people, once we move to that one, to where he's clearly fallen in favor. He hasn't stood out. I think a lot of the people scouting and the league would attribute that a lot to the quarterback play with everything going on there. So I think there's a little bit of hope, and maybe they're trying to transition the offense to make it easier. So maybe he can make an impact with all those screens and everything that he did when he was younger. But yeah, I do agree. Like we're seeing regression, or maybe just not the opportunity to progress is the best way to put it.
Yeah. Why did Mason Graham fall? Like Mason Graham has had a great year. I don't think maybe it's just the 5 ahead of him who just vaulted up pretty significantly, except Ted McMillan. But like he basically traded places with Malachi Starks in this regard, and I just don't really understand that. But that's so like nitpicky that I don't care that much about that. I think you're right though. He's kind of alluded to the fact that there might only be 6 or 7 players worthy of like definite top 10 grades in this class.
Which is fair. I mean, we've kind of been spoiled over the last few years, if we're going to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, last thing about this first 12, I think Michael Williams has a chance to push for edge one. I think some teams will really like him and just his upside there. I know Abdul Carter's there. I know he's the premium guy there, but he's definitely moved him up. He moved him up 6 spots. And there's gonna be a team that falls in love with the Georgia edge guy. Like that's just kind of the deal. That's how it goes in the NFL draft. That's just how it goes.
God, if he's an Eagle, I swear to God,
he will be.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know. They're playing pretty well there. All right, let's go into the next kind of tier here. So at 13, we have Colson Loveland, tight end from Michigan. Shout out Colson Loveland going up there. These guys think I'm just a homer, but so is my guy, Dane Brugler. Derek Harmon, defensive tackle at Oregon at 14. Shamir Stewart for edge at A&M from 15. At 16, Cam Ward, quarterback Miami. So there's our first QB. Interesting down here. Christian's take on that QB there. Nick Scorton, edge out of A&M at 17. Kelvin Banks Jr., offensive tackle at Texas at 18. I think Williams, defensive tackle, Ohio State, popping in there, boys. I know you guys liked him a lot. At 19, 20, Walter Nolan, defensive tackle, jumped up 24 spots. Big riser here. And that's something these two guys were on really early. So shout out them. Sharon Revel Jr., cornerback at ECU, obviously is injured this year, but still has him in his top 25. That's something that we've noted too, that, hey, he's still talented there. We get some pushback based on where we mock him. And so I think Brugler having him there too says something. Jalen Monroe coming in at 22. I think that's interesting. Quarterback from Alabama, Shador Sanders at 23, Colorado, and then JT. Oh man,
Tui Mullowow.
Perfect. Edge out of Ohio State at 24. Wrapping up that. Any takeaways, Christian, from this group?
So I know you want to hear my thoughts on Cam Ward. I did put out. So if the season ended today, I would have Cam Ward within 1 point of Drew Aller, who is my QB1. So, okay. I get it. I would have Shador Sanders as my QB3 within 2.5 points in my grading scale. So, it's not outlandish to prefer one over the other. And I think Cam Ward's, been starting for a long time and justifiably gets this QB1 nod based on his play this year. That's not how I have it evaluated, but I understand it. I'm shocked that he has Jalen Milroe over Shador Sanders, to be honest. Like, I can't believe they had to cook him, right? Like, I get cooked all the time for saying Shador Sanders is my QB3. He's got him at QB3, but behind Jalen Milroe, who really has been inconsistent this year. But it's kind of reassuring to know that NFL teams are seeing the athleticism. They're seeing what the upside could potentially be with Milroe. And to me, I kind of think that gives us a path to a Jalen Milroe first-round selection. Maybe it's in the back of the first. Maybe it's in that Lamar Jackson type of range. But that's fine if we can get him in the first round. Now, I wouldn't be shocked if Jalen Milroe goes back to school. I think Cam Ward and Sanders certainly are declaring after this year. But I wouldn't be shocked if Milroe goes back to school, which then throws a little bit of a wrench in this quarterback class, I guess. But because as we get through the rest of this big board, I don't think there's another quarterback in here. So that's it.
Literally in the next tier there is.
Oh, okay. Oh yeah. Well, he's going back to school too. So
I know that's the issue.
Yeah. So I guess like it's interesting to me because Dane Brugler at the beginning of this article kind of mentioned how he was talking to scouts and he was asking them about the quarterback class, and they were like, yeah, I don't envy you for having to put big boards out in rankings right now because we don't even know at this point. So I think that just speaks to the lack of clarity with this quarterback class that we've been talking about on this show for weeks and weeks now.
I think that comes to what they want to see what's going on here. Like, I think it's a mental side of it because I do think some of these guys got the tools. And I'm interested to hear Randy's take on this because when he writes about Shador, because I'm going to not let Randy not talk about Shador because he's going to be a Raider. So he goes in here and he talks about, like, there's a lot to love about him. Poised, tough, accurate, natural feet, layers of football well. So those are the things that we talked about. But he did say the main concerns that he sees from a scouting perspective and from scouts out there, way he manages the pocket's inconsistent, drifting, negative plays, and he also says that you can't just play in the offensive line every time he takes a sack, which I think is a very, very valid critique of him. But the thing I want to ask Randy about, he comps him to Jordan Love. So he said he kind of reminds him of a Jordan Love type player, a quarterback there. What's your take on that comp? Do you like that comp?
I do, and that's mainly for the fact that, like, Jordan Love was Christian's boy. This was early on in her scouting process.
That's right.
He wouldn't shut up about him. He kept making the fatal flaw and trying to avoid it of comparing him to Mahomes as well. So we were fighting over that mostly. Mostly, but I get the comparison because it's a lot of just smart decision making and growth that we've seen, and that's what like all this intensity and electricity we've seen from the Packers since Love has taken over has been just a lot of growth and stuff that was a little bit unexpected. And I think going into this year, Shador has really confirmed a lot of things that he's growing and becoming a better quarterback and really getting into the system. And I do think it's a fun comp because you're also kind of saying like, oh, there's not like he can spread it around. He doesn't need like the top weapon. I do have a little bit of concern that Travis Hunter does bail him out a lot, but he also just makes a great throw every time as well. I do think it's going to be fun. But again, Jordan Love went later in the first round to be a backup. Shador is going to be drafted in the top 10 to be a starter and a franchise savior. That's the major difference, and that's usually the detriment of the player.
And Jordan Love had like tools. Like Shador has fine tools and they're good, but like he wins up here. Jordan Love has a freaking hose of an arm. Like Shador doesn't. Shador has an okay arm. I think I would call it like league average. Shador Sanders' arm reminds me of Joe Burrow's arm, which I know is actually a step up from Jordan Love. But like in terms of like he doesn't always have a ton of velocity, but he does throw with good touch. He can throw over the middle of the field really well. Like it reminds me more of that, or like even a CJ Stroud type of arm. But that's where like I get a little hesitant on that comp just because there's not as much elasticity with Shador. There's not that much drive behind the football, but he does drift back in the pocket and make some crazy throws, and it tends to work out. So maybe I'm the crazy one. I don't know, but
different level of competition for Colorado and Utah State though as well.
True, that's fair.
Yeah, no, I think
Barely.
Okay.
Big 12 sucks.
No. Okay, listen, as a resident Fresno State ticket holder, let me tell you what. When I go to Mountain West games, they are not the most talented dudes out there. Like, let me just keep that here. Like, when I took my daughter to watch Michigan Washington, you could tell she's like, oh, this is a real football game because she's used to go to Fresno State games. Like, there is definitely a little bit of a mixture there. The other guy that I thought was interesting, he popped up here, Derek Harmon from Oregon. Like, he kind of came out of not nowhere, but actually he wasn't even in the big board. Now he's all the way up to 14. He mentioned him, when you're looking at just overall, like raw numbers, not like anything that really pops off. 3 sacks this year. He's 6'5", 310. He's a like a big boy out there at Oregon. When you're looking at pass rushing grade, 85.0. Hurries, he's at 33 hurries on the season. So they talked about like the stats necessarily isn't like something that pops off, but he said disruption for him is key. And he's a big reason why he talked about him, like this Oregon defense stepping up against Wisconsin. You saw that. You saw the hurries in there, the disruption in there. This defense really stepped up against Wisconsin this last week. Any thoughts on Derek Harmon? I know that's not someone that we've talked about before, so I thought it'd be interesting to get your guys' takes.
I like him. I mean, he made my top 50 as well. He was, I believe he's my like number 33, number 34, somewhere around there.
Okay.
It's just such a strong defensive tackle class that I like a lot of the things that Harmon's doing. I just have a preference for the two guys on this specific graphic. If you're watching on YouTube, that I think that those two are a little bit better. But like I said, and I keep preaching, this defensive tackle class is one of the better ones I've ever evaluated. And so to get, what do we have, 4 in the top 20 here? That makes sense to me. And I have it pretty similar here as well.
Yeah, I was going to say he just deserves the jump up. I think personally I would flip Harmon and Nolan just for performance and growth I've seen this year. But there does seem to be a bit of like how the team's doing influence on these rankings as well.
Yeah. Can I throw a quick critique in before we move on?
Yeah.
Sorry, Dane. Because Dane's not the only one that has this, this player ranked this highly, but Shamar Stewart, edge from Texas A&M, you couldn't pay me millions of dollars to try to convince someone that he's better than his teammate Nick Gordon. Like when I watch the two play, I get it. Shamar Stewart's probably the better athlete. He's got all the pass rushing tools that we always really fall in love with, and it's not dissimilar to Mykel Williams in that regard. But man, I watched 2 full games and I didn't see a single pass rush win. I had to go searching for a pass rush win on his film. And those players scare the hell out of me because on some level, yeah, the athleticism matters and the ability to develop a toolbox and ability to get to the quarterback is important. But also, we've seen that production does matter a little bit. If you can't get to the quarterback in college, then why would you get to the quarterback against better tackles at the NFL level? So I'm out on Shamar Stewart as far as like consensus goes, but like I said, Dane's not the only one with this evaluation of him. I have seen him in top 15, top 20 range for almost everyone. So I just wanted to get my own take off where I don't agree. Sorry.
It's the classic upside versus tape.
It's a little annoying.
It's just tools. You see the tools there, and they're there. And if a team just buys in, watch Jacksonville draft him. Top 5.
They would love him. He sucks. So.
That's just how it works. Well, okay.
He doesn't suck.
Yeah, okay,
doesn't
yeah.
suck.
Let's be careful there, boys. I've seen Christian play basketball on Twitter before. I don't think he wants to judge Shamir Stewart's athleticism.
My ass.
He keeps posting it. I don't know why.
Yeah, I don't know. He's just the bald Steph Curry, as he calls himself. But the last thing I will say about this Siobhan Revel Jr. from East Carolina. He talks about him. He's like, hey, you know what? He's about a dozen spots lower than he would have been if he was healthy. So I think he really liked him because he probably would have been in his top 12 had he not gotten hurt. But 6'2", 200 and with 4.3 speed, like that's why he's this high still. Like, so if you see that and you go through it, you're like, hey, why is he still there? I mean, he mentioned that he's just like, hey, this kid has the upside that you like to see there. And he does. It does sound like scouts and everybody thinks he's coming out. And like, so he did say he still has a first round grade for him. So that's just something to note. Like if you're hearing that, you're wondering about, Revel and what's going on there. All right, let's go to the next 12 here. Kenneth Grant coming up 5 spots there at 25, defensive tackle from Michigan. Tyler Warren, tight end, Penn State, getting into his top 50, wasn't in there before. Cameron Williams, offensive tackle from Texas, the guy that we've mentioned a few times here on the show. He jumps in there at 27. Alec Manor, whatever, wide receiver out of Stanford at 28. He's very high on a lot of people's boards, and I think that's my biggest surprise. I don't know why he's that high. 29, Josh Simmons, offensive tackle from Ohio State. Garrett Nussmeier still at number 30. He was his QB1 prior to his first board, or after his first board came out. LSU. Landon Jackson, edge out of Arkansas at 31. Jonah Saviania out of offensive tackle out of Arizona at 32. Josh Cornerly Jr., offensive tackle out of Oregon at 33. Deonte Walker, defensive tackle out of Kentucky at 34. Emeka Egbuka, wide receiver, Ohio State at 35. Evan Stewart still in the top 36. He's sitting there at 36 at wide receiver out of Oregon. And then Mike Green, edge out of Marshall, the Herd. I love seeing it. That's my favorite logo ever in college football. What do you take away from this group, Randy? What are you seeing here?
A bunch of new tackles. Just trying to find the value where you could here. It felt like, we've been talking about Cameron Williams for a while. Josh Simmons, with a great first month before the knee injury, was propelling him up probably even above this. Mm-hmm. Josh Cornerly Jr., another Oregon player, just vaulting up the board after a strong season from the team. I think that's the biggest thing. We're seeing a few more of the defensive players. Garrett Nussmeier kind of pops up, but to me, it's mainly just the offensive tackles. I think these are the ones that he, as well as the league, are looking to take shots on and possibly move inside, if you're including Savanaia.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is kind of the sweet spot for tackles, and I think we're going to see maybe some maybe we've been in mock drafts overreaching to fit tackles to teams that need tackles. Earlier in the draft, I just maybe teams just won't do that this year because this isn't. We talked about it last week. I just don't think it's a very good tackle class in general as far as not having top end talent. Alec Manor, I don't know how to say his name. And the reason I don't know how to say his name, we've been watching him for years now, and like, man, I don't know what's going on with Alec. I see a path to him being a good player, and like he's had a couple of good games this year, maybe 3-4 good games. He's gotten worse from last year, in my opinion, actually. And he wasn't on people's radar. So to me, this screams scouts are buzzing about him. And so the draft media guys are getting him on the board. So maybe we're going to see him drafted in this range, but boy, oh boy, if he's better than Emeka Ibuka, then I might need to find a new profession or hobby, whatever this is, because I just don't see that at all.
No, I feel like it's screaming like Jalen Polk round 2-ish, like kind of. And I like Polk. I like Polk more than I like Alec. And I think they have a freshman at Stanford, Emmett Mosley the fifth. He's better. He earns more targets.
Yeah.
Like when you watch the games, he's very good. And like there has been multiple games, and the reason why I know this is because I illegally sport bet out here in California. Sorry, Gavin Newsom. And like when I go over like the targets and I'm looking at it like and kind of over targets with both of these guys, because I do like they're always negative game scripts. So I'm always looking like, all right, how's Stanford going to do in this one? And how we see it? You see Emmett getting more targets there, and that's where I'm just like, I just don't see it. I think this is based on upside. Even in when he was kind of detailing why he picked it, the way he kind of did it was like, well, he's got the size and speed, and after the top guys, after McMillan and Hunter and Burden, where else you're going to go? And so I think that's kind of where you're getting with him. And maybe he's right. Maybe he is right when you're looking at that from that perspective. I just think Emeka is better.
Yeah, I mean, it's plain and simple. He's better.
This wide receiver class isn't good, but like Trey Harris is sitting right there. Yeah. I'd rather have Trey Harris. Like that's the size speed guy. Like what do you
and the upside?
Yeah, like I mean that dude looks like he's not as good as him, but like that Ole Miss jersey looks like AJ Brown out there. He's not as good, but I'd rather take a bet on that than the Stanford wide receiver that's gotten worse in the last 2 years. I don't know.
We constantly have the argument of upside versus just tape and talent, and this is just another example, like we already talked about, where he even put Emeka Ibuka. It already looks like he's played on Sundays, and there's a reason for that. It's because he's very good, and he's going to start right away and be just a great asset to an offense. And now we're just putting people up that might test better. It's the same stuff we did with Amon-Ra St. Brown. When me and Christian had no idea why the heck he went that way. I mean, we were both like, I mean, we're hearing nothing about it, but like he's first round to us, or at least late first, early second, and just kept falling. I think, again, teams will be shocked and disappointed that they let another great receiver fall.
Yeah, no, that's what it screams. I just feel like Evan is not flashy, maybe. So like you see that there. The other guy too that I got in a fight with last week on social media, I like bringing these guys up. Landon Jackson, for the edge from Arkansas. A lot of people are talking about him. He has 6 sacks on the year. He's listed at 6'7", 280 on PFF. On Brugler's, it was 6'5", 271. So depending on what that looks like there, I don't know. This is pretty high for him. And some people were saying that he should be a top 20 in the mock drafts that I did. And I'm like, he's pretty stiff. Like, I don't know. Like when you're watching him play, he's very stiff out there. He wouldn't be someone that I'd be comfortable drafting in the first round, like or having a top 32 grade on. Where are you guys at with Landon?
So scheme fit matters with him. I think he's a 3-4 defensive end where you can have someone a little bit speedier off the edge next to him that could maybe help. And I do think, like, as far as eating up space, 6'5", 270 is going to do that. But yeah, I don't see a whole lot of bender on the edge. Kelvin Banks Jr. just put him kind of in a hell this last week. He just like shoved him into the ground, and Kelvin Banks Jr. hasn't been all that good this year. So I think he doesn't have a huge repertoire of pass rush moves. He's got a good motor, and when you have a good motor and you're 270 pounds and super, super lengthy, teams are going to be interested. But I wouldn't have him in my first round mocks either. I've seen him there quite a bit. So I think like this is closer to consensus, but I think he's more of like a top 50 to 75 player even. I don't have a final grade on or a working grade on him at this moment, but I would guess that he would land somewhere in the like 50 to 60 range as of right now.
Yeah, I kind of have him. I'm trying to think of the best way. My notes on him would be effort edge setter for the next level. I think he's in the same tier as Sawyer was last year from Ohio State, to where we didn't know, like, it had to be a good fit, and then we know he's going to get the effort that you want, but it may not have all the tools. Now Sawyer's come back, and we've seen more tools with that effort and edge setting, and it's developed more. I obviously we're not going to see Landon Jackson come back to do that, but I do think there's development there.
Yeah, I don't know. He just screams reach Dallas Cowboy pick. Like, I feel like that is just like,
that's right.
He really does. And he's from Arkansas, which is like scares the hell out of me. Like that. Okay, we're moving on now. We're going to be going to the next 12 here to wrap out his top 50. Maxwell Harrison, cornerback out of Kentucky at 38. Caleb Johnson, running back out of Iowa at 39. Pretty high for Caleb Johnson. We'll probably get into that. Amarian Hampton, running back from North Carolina at 40. 41, Nick Emanawari, safety out of South Carolina. Wyatt Millam, offensive lineman out of West Virginia. Jack Sawyer, edge out of Ohio State. Tyler Booker, offensive lineman out of Alabama at 44. Isaiah Bond, 45, wide receiver out of Texas. Arianate Ursuri from offensive tackle out of Minnesota. Gray Zabel, offensive lineman out of North Dakota State. Kyle Kennard, edge out of South Carolina. Mason Taylor, tight end LSU. And Jihad Campbell getting in there, Alabama at number 50. Interesting here, a lot of new guys in this range. So you're seeing a lot of that. Ursuri's the one that dropped the most. What's your take on that, Randy, when you're thinking you dropped 20 spots here, going all the way down to 46, especially in a tackle class that, we've been talking about this tackle class being there, but maybe just not having a great senior year.
Exactly. It's another one where we were expecting better things and more development from this tackle class, and we just haven't seen it. Everything I've seen, it's just been just not great footwork, sloppy at times, and just kind of trying to win on his size. I mean, he's 6'6", 337. He's a good athlete. It all makes sense, but it's just he's trying to use just anchor and size to win instead of just developing everything. And I think that's why he slips down, because it's going to be a bit more coaching than even we saw from Simons early.
Yeah.
I have him at 42, so I'm right in line with where he's at. I don't know. Like, when you have this level of offensive line class, I think he'll probably go a little bit higher than this. That said, the interior options that are on this specific group are really, really good options. I'm glad that he has Wyatt Millam as an interior offensive lineman. I'm going to regrade him and move him there myself. Tyler Booker, to me, is like a top 20 player in this class. But I understand, like, there's been inconsistency. That's me projecting him to the next level and not so much what we've seen this year. The thing that I just said that I hate with edge rushers, but I like doing it with guards because that tends to, bite me in the ass a lot. But Greg Zabel as well, he's a good player. I evaluated him this weekend, and man, he can play all 5 offensive linemen positions. A lot of people are projecting him to be a center at the NFL level, but like, he's playing good tackle. And so I think there's an upside for him to push a little bit higher than this 47 here.
Did he get a Senior Bowl invite? Because he's going to have a lot of fun there if he does.
Yes, that's why I graded him, actually, is because I was going through the Senior Bowl list and saw him on there, and I was like, oh yeah, this kid can definitely play.
Yeah, every year we get an effort offensive line meta showing us all 5 positions, and I already know it's him. Like, so he's going to shoot up. He might even go in the first.
Yeah, I mean, they were really mentioning him as being the top center in the class. Like, they were talking about him as being that guy, and that could be it. I want to be negative. What the hell is Caleb Johnson doing in the top 40? Like, I don't see it. Like, I just don't. And it sucks because I like Caleb Johnson coming out of high school. He was one of my sleeper guys when we were talking about fantasy from college side. And, I hate this because I'm hearing this a lot with Caleb. And they keep talking about his averaging like over 7 yards per carry. that's really not a statistic that you do for running backs in college, especially with this offensive line, especially with the system that they have. And like, yeah, Caleb is good, but like, when have we ever seen an Iowa running back translate over to the NFL level? We just haven't. And part of that is the system that they have in place there. And I think he's fine. I don't think he's top 40 though. I'd like Amari and Hampton over this. There's other guys not on this list that I feel like should be on this list for his top 50 at running back position, right? Like when you go just going through it, like, yeah, Judkins isn't on there, is he? Travion Henderson's not on there. Like Singleton. I mean, Judkins to me is a smash over both those guys, Caleb and Amari and Hampton there. So to me, that really stood out to me because, like, I don't know how you have Caleb over the two Ohio State guys, Nicholas Singleton, and probably some other guys out there. Dylan Sampson, possibly. I think Dylan Sampson has better upside from Tennessee than Caleb Johnson does. So that was probably my biggest, like, whoa, he popped up and he was out. He wasn't even in it in the first initial one. So I think that's probably the biggest guy I have, probably the biggest difference with Brugler on.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a good complementary piece. Like, I think he can fill in to like the David Montgomery role right now, to where you're just trying to get north and south and get touchdowns. Or maybe that's a bit explosive, but it's kind of the same thing of just you have the other electric piece. Like if he's replacing Mostert, which obviously if they draft another running back would be insane, but still.
I mean, I have James Conner as his comp. I think he plays a lot like James Conner, but I mean, even looking back, I probably wouldn't have taken James Conner with the top 40 pick. You know, like he's had a really good career, but it's just that's a certain type of back that I think you can find a lot throughout the draft. I do want to like pour one out for Dane because he had Garrett Nussmeier in his top 30 and he had Caleb Johnson here at 39, and both of them were terrible this week. Caleb Johnson 2.7 yards per carry this week, and he did find the end zone, but it just wasn't very good. And then Garrett Nussmeier, my take on him this week was welcome to the 2026 NFL draft, buddy, because I don't think you're declaring now. But no. And as someone who puts out content, that happens to me all the time. I say players are really good, and then they go out there and they prove me wrong. So, but yeah, I don't understand. I don't understand not having the Ohio State backs over him. Nicholas Singleton is my 2 right now, just with the upside of what he can be. Caleb Johnson to me is a guy you can find. So
that's the thing. He's a guy you can find, especially in the deep classes that we see here. He's not necessarily a guy that I would have in my top 40. That's just kind of how I look at those guys there. Now, we're going to wrap this up. We're going to talk about guys have dropped out. So we have a list of guys that have dropped out. I'm going to let them kind of look at it right now as we're going through it. And either actually, let's just start with Christian. Drew Aller dropped out of his of here in terms of the big board. And he has like Milroe. He has these guys out there. Obviously that's a big one because as Christian knows, he's this QB1. He's talked about how he's improved there. Why do you think he took him out of his top 50?
I mean, my first inclination is that he doesn't think he's declaring.
Yeah.
Which I think that's a totally fair assessment. And maybe he's heard that from others, or I don't understand the lack of hype around Drew Aller in the national media. Is it coming from the NFL and scouts aren't super excited about him? Are scouts hanging on to the 2023 film because they haven't been watching a whole lot of Penn State games? Or is the Penn State offense and Andy Kotelnicki getting too much credit for Aller's growth? Because I think it is hard to separate the bells and whistles of that offense and what Drew Aller is actually doing that's translatable, because Andy Kotelnicki, boy, if he can put Tyler Warren at quarterback, he's going to do it. And if he can bring in the backup quarterback to run read options, he's going to do it. So I think maybe that's depressing Drew Aller's value. But Drew Aller this weekend, 17 of 19, 247 yards, 3 touchdowns, had an adjusted completion percentage of 94.7. Yeah, because there was a drop in there. So, yeah, seems like a top 50 player to me. I don't know.
Randy, who stands out to you and the guys that dropped out? Either good, bad, indifferent. Where are you at with this group?
Well, the stuff that doesn't stand out is the quarterbacks dropping. Quinn Ewers, I think, still could have been in here, but with Drew Aller's growth this year, if he's not in here, I understand. Carson Beck deserves to be down here, even after a better week. But my biggest one is Benjamin Morrison. Obviously, the guy I've talked about in here a good amount. The injury and we saw some up and down play before then. But I think the tape before, I do think I was curious how many secondary players we'd see on here. And, you dropped Harrison down 6 spots. I guess he's still in because he's still playing. You brought in a new safety. Like, I just think he's still a top 50 player.
Sorry, and just to piggyback off that, like, Dane loves Jahdae Barron from Texas, the corner that's had a really good year. And, I mean, I know he was kind of hanging on to the back part of that top 50, but, I mean, that's another player that I think has shown that he was right in putting him on his initial top 50, and he just fell off. Maybe there's some methodology that goes behind it that I don't know about, but to me, I would have been like, yeah, I got that right, and I'm putting him on my top 50 big board again. Losers.
Yeah, I mean, to me, this says that at the very end of the second, top of the third, I'll be able to get him, Benjamin Morrison, Denzel Burke, and just a good amount of strong secondary corners. Like, I think Morrison definitely could be a corner 1. And then I don't necessarily think Denzel Burke can be, but he has been. He just hasn't grown. I was probably more shocked that he was at 34 to start, not like 44. But I still think he's around 60 here. And Ollie Gordon's the funny one, to where it's like you have him at 35. It felt like a lot of hype. And then, again, tape was adequate, and there was a lot of stats, and then it's just fallen off a cliff.
Yeah.
It's funny that he just replaced Ollie Gordon with a different version of Ollie Gordon.
Caleb Johnson. Yep.
Yes,
I know. I was thinking about that too. Like, and we were never high. Me and Christian were on Ollie Gordon there. The guy I'm glad Randy kind of brought him up. Burke has lost him a ton of money. Denzel Burke, cornerback out of Ohio State right now. Like, he got picked on by Dylan Gabriel. We know that, but he actually got kind of picked on by, if you guys know this, Randy, who's the Northwestern quarterback? Do you know who he is?
I don't remember the name.
You watched, you were there,
yeah,
but
yeah.
Christian has no idea who the Northwestern is. Jack Lausch is the Northwestern quarterback.
It's funny because I watched part of Northwestern and I still didn't. I watched them 2 days ago when we're recording here, and I still couldn't remember who it was. That's how.
So he picked on Burke a little bit, and there was times where they were moving the ball against him in that first half, obviously. And when you're thinking of the wide receiver 2, Kurtz, I think his name is, Bryce Kurtz, kind of had single coverage and was kind of cooking him a little bit on a couple routes. And you're like, and that's going to happen. I understand with corners, it's going to happen there, but it's not always inspiring when a Northwestern wide receiver is kind of doing that to you in single coverage and doing that, go balls against you. Denzel, I think, has dropped the most, obviously, with Harold Perkins injuries down there. Emory Jones dropped out of his top 50 all the way from 13. I mean, that is a big one at that tackle position, too. Has not looked great. That LSU team is a mess right now, obviously, with all the different parts there. So those are the things that kind of stand out to me. This is a fun process, though. Obviously, we're still early into it, but it is fun seeing kind of where we're at with some of these guys here. Christian, any final takeaways on the big board?
No, I gave my criticisms, but as someone who puts together big boards, this is tough work, and especially when Dane's got the benefit of also having scouts telling him what they're seeing and where these players are viewed from an NFL lens. So he has to balance that and his own evaluations. And I think, shout out to Dane for continuing to do good work at the Athletic and giving us something to talk about, because right now, putting together a top 50 in this current NFL draft class is a really, really tough thing to do. Mentioned it at the top, but when you only have 6 or 7 or 8 players that you're kind of interested in the top 10, then it gets super murky after that. There might be teams that have, Jahdae Barron, for example, who's off of Dane Brugler's top 50 as a top 25 player, and he goes in the first round, and those classes are more exciting to me because I think it can separate some of the better evaluators from the others, and also it gives you a little lens into what the media hears from the NFL and how much that changes down the stretch as well.
Yeah, it makes those mock draft competitions a lot harder as well, which scares me because the last one I remember kind of like this. Kyrie Elam won the first, and we didn't really
Yeah,
see that as a
rumors.
problem at the time. I'd like to think we're better at scouting corners over the years now, but
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I just think this goes to show you that even the professionals that do this for a living and get paid, there's a lot of question marks outside of top 7 or 6, like overall. And I think it's a fun process. And I think, we couldn't talk about everybody in this group, but it is interesting to see kind of who's falling out. And there's always going to be disagreements there. I think Caleb, for example, we didn't even really talk about Maxwell Harrison from Kentucky, dropped down a little bit, like those type of players out there all across the board. So we appreciate you guys tuning in. As always, we thank you guys for what you guys do for us on the podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe. We appreciate all the love out there always. And hey, drop in the comments. We're going to get Randy to comment back at you, let you know why you're wrong and he's right. Drop in there guys that you think should have been higher or lower. Who are some sleepers out there? Are you guys, I have some positive Carson Beck love out there from some people after his last game. So maybe people out there, Georgia fans, think he should be in the top 50 there. We'll catch you guys next week on the Quarters Podcast.